Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Don Hudson. We're going to do things a little bit different this week. We're going to start off talking to our pundits. We have with us Shelley Breeden, attorney, Michael Covington, our industrial consultant, and Craig Griffith, who's here with us generally every week, healthcare analyst. I think that Courtney and George are going to really miss out today because we have a lot to get into. We're going to listen to part of the State of the Union, some of the highlights from the State of the Union, and we're going to listen to some of the State of the State from the governor, and then we're going to have your reaction. So we're going to begin by listening to President Biden, and then we'll go from there.
But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system. I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking.
All right, let's begin there. Two topics, gas prices from the president and the infrastructure bill. We'll start, Shelley, you're the guest, and we'll let you begin on whichever one you want to tackle first.
Well, let's look at infrastructure. I think, as President Biden said, we're 15th in infrastructure. We have to get back to America really focusing on infrastructure. There, a few years ago, we had some bridge collapse. People at that point really realized our infrastructure is crumbling. We've neglected maintaining it for decades now. And I'm glad to see both President Biden and Governor Bill Lee in his State of the State, which I know we're going to talk about, addressing transportation and really putting money into transportation, which creates jobs. Our unemployment rate is low right now, but it's going to create jobs in the future to upkeep that and really maintain America's infrastructure and allow us to develop more jobs.
All right. Michael, let's let you take the second stab. Either you can talk infrastructure or gas prices.
Well, I can take a stab at both of them quickly. Gas prices, they were roughly $2.35 when Trump left office. I took a trip to Union County over the weekend and filled up the truck, and it was $3.99 for 100% gas. So we're not any better off than we were when President Biden was at his worst. He has sought to fill up the strategic oil reserve that he depleted to try to mitigate the high price of gas. He's replacing that at probably $75 a barrel for gas for the oil that he's purchasing to replace it with at a very slow rate. That money's coming from somewhere, and Trump bought that same oil for probably $25 to $30 a barrel. So there's no net gain. There's a tremendous net loss. Infrastructure, I think it's a marvelous idea. I simply don't trust the stewardship of President Biden and his administration. I think that I wouldn't trust them with that much money. It's not going to work out. It's not going to go as well as it should. They are not good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars.
And Craig.
Well, on the stewardship of the president, most of that money goes to the states. The states determine what the infrastructure projects are, which ones they want to fund first, which ones are shovel ready, which ones they need to get going on as soon as possible. So I think it's way past due to have improvements into our infrastructure. In terms of gas prices and coming out of the pandemic, no one knew what was going on. The demand for oil shot up worldwide, and up went the prices. And also, I might point out, up went to record profits for the oil companies as well. They didn't help us at all by perhaps taking a little less profit and keeping the price of oil lower. So it's a difficult thing. It's just like inflation as a whole. We're in an economy now. When we went into the pandemic, we had a minimum wage of around $7, and it's now almost impossible for an employer to hire someone for less than $15 an hour. So that cost is being baked into the economy now, which is resulting in price increases. So it's going to have to find its way through the economy, and hopefully in the future will level off, even though I don't have much confidence in the Fed to make good decisions on this inflationary pressure. I think they had way too much of a interest rate hikes.
I am in total agreement. I am in total agreement with Craig about the states being in charge of that spending. That part of it is really good. We're in total agreement that the states having control over those federal infrastructure dollars is a good thing, but to the degree that the federal government is involved, I have a real problem with it.
Yeah. And you brought up inflation. I mean, that's still an issue. Maybe not as bad of an issue, but it's still an issue compared to when President Biden took over. Where do you see that headed? And is he right to even talk about it, considering where it's been moving, and where it's gone over the last year?
Start with the price of a dozen eggs. Just start with the price of a dozen eggs. That's the benchmark. The price of a dozen eggs and the price of food in general is out of control. And so the inflation that has been caused by the economic policies of the Biden administration have crippled the country.
And the price of eggs is more determined by the avian flu that's resulted in the killing of 45 million chickens in the United States. So there's a multitude of issues that are here going into play. And again, the new economy that we have after the pandemic has to be baked. These same grocery stores are having to pay much more to get employees now than they did before the pandemic. So until all those costs are baked into the economy, I think we're going to still have probably significant inflation. And you can't ignore it. I mean, it's out there. It's what people are dealing with every day.
Shelley?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think most economists agree that you can't contribute all of it just to the current interest rates. We're still catching up, and a lot of this inflation is still due. It began with COVID-19, with a pandemic that no one saw, that none of us have experienced in our lifetime, and all of the supply chain shortages that we experienced and we saw, and that was really the beginning of it. It cannot all be attributed to the current economic policies. We're seeing that come down. At the same time, there's sort of the misery index of what some people say. That's the combination of inflation and unemployment. And at this point, we have very low unemployment and still high inflation. So I think it's very difficult for any administration to tackle both of those at the same time. I think the Biden administration has unemployment down, and at this point, they're working on getting the inflation down. And it's slow. It's going to be slow. It's too slow. I agree with that, but it is coming down. I think we're going to see some of those prices come down.
Let's move on to some other issues. Let's listen to the president talking here about Medicare and Social Security.
Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote.
We heard from the president. We also heard from people who were disagreeing with him. Is the president right or Republicans right about Social Security, Medicare, and their statements there? We'll go with reverse order here and start with Craig.
Well, it certainly sounded a little bit like the House of Commons in that State of the Union address. A lot of banter back and forth. There's truth on both sides. The Republicans have desired to get a handle on Medicare and Social Security by changing those programs. I have a copy of the Republican Study Committee's budget plan for 2023 that called for significant changes to Social Security, Medicare, almost complete privatization of Medicare, which is a something that most seniors don't really want to have. So I think that it's a policy that a lot of people have adopted, because when you get down to brass tacks, 24% of the budget goes to healthcare issues, and 26% goes to Social Security. If you're going to get a handle on spending, or you're going to get a handle on the budget, you have to do something with those programs. But both of those are the third rail of American politics. If you change them, touch them, it's almost sure death, like it is the third rail in the railroads. So when former President Trump told them not to touch Medicare or Social Security, he was following that third rail of American politics policy. But until you get a handle on the spending of those two programs alone, you're going to have very difficult times lowering spending, getting the budget under control.
Now, what I've read about it, it's just said that some had said, hey, this is just something that needs to be discussed and looked at every 5 years. And I know that Speaker McCarthy is on record as saying we are not touching those programs as part of the Deficit Act. So it's like you said.
Well, I wouldn't trust what he says, like I wouldn't trust what Democrats say about it. So we'll have to wait and see what the plan is. They haven't put out a plan for how they're going to attack this budget issue in the debt ceiling battle. So we'll have to wait and see what they propose.
Michael?
You know, I have to agree with a lot of what Craig said, and I know he's very knowledgeable in this area. Anything that the president says about Republicans intending to cut or sunset Medicare or Social Security, if that were true, that would be the death of the Republican Party. It would literally kill the Republican Party. So we know that there's no intention to kill the Republican Party. So it cannot be that Republicans are trying to do away with Social Security or Medicaid. Their constituents, senior Republicans, would not tolerate that. So just to suggest that is inflammatory and was effective enough to get Republicans to respond, just as Craig was saying, like it was the House of Commons. It needs to be studied. Some really smart people willing to engage in give and take, and some real fiscal responsibility being applied should sit together and find ways to make Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare work better for the American people. That's what needs to happen. But sunsetting them or concluding them is not good, and America won't stand for it.
And Shelley?
Hey, there certainly have been Republicans who have proposed that. You even have one Republican who, Mike Lee, I think, who wanted to phase out Social Security. I think anytime that you're talking about, like Craig said, cutting spending in the budget, that comes up. Lindsey Graham and some others wanted to raise the age at one point of Social Security and cut out some benefits. Not totally get rid of Social Security, but raise the age where you can receive Social Security benefits. So again, this has come up because, as Craig said, it's such a huge item in the budget. But yes, there have been proposals by Ron Johnson, by Rick Scott down in Florida, about sunsetting. I think Senator Johnson was every year, and I think Senator Scott was every 5 years, that it comes back before Congress. I will say, I don't know necessarily that they said we want to get rid of it when it comes up, but it does have to come up and then Congress have to address it again. I simply don't agree with that. This is something that Americans count on, and I can't imagine ever having it come up every year, every 5 years to be negotiated, and even risk seniors possibly missing out on that because they can't come to a resolution in Congress.
All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more from the State of the Union and the State of the State.
Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. Folks, you all are was as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view.
All right, let's just jump on that. Do you see us being able to even unite the country when sometimes people say, I've got a different idea, and then it leads to screaming and yelling or fighting or name calling? And Michael, we haven't started with you, but we'll let you go first into this. Are we going to be able to get along?
We can. It's a function of leadership. Someone has to be the adult in the room. Someone has to say, listen, let's put our egos, our attitudes, and our politicizing these issues to the side and sit down and talk about actual solutions. That's been the problem. We're hung up on rhetoric. We're hung up on sound bites. We're hung up on the things that will get us on CNN, on Fox, and MSNBC. We need to have leaders sitting at the table working for the American people and working for the benefit of those that they serve.
Shelley, Craig?
I would say I absolutely agree with that. We need to stop looking for the sound bites, and really a divided Congress is more likely to get more done. That's how our country functions the best, is when we have both sides who are represented. And at this point, we have the House having the majority with Republicans and the Senate being led by Democrats still, that they are forced to come together. And I actually think that generally is a good thing for our country and getting things done, and actually getting to the middle of policies, which is what most Americans want.
Correct.
Well, as I've said before in this Congress, compromise is a four-letter word. There's very little incentive to compromise on your issues. And Michael was talking about leadership. Unfortunately, in the House, the Speaker of the House has a very narrow margin, and took 15 votes for him to be elected Speaker. So I don't know where that leadership is going to come from, because members of his caucus are performers and not legislators. I don't think that they're really interested in compromising on any of the issues. And that has to do with a number of factors, I think. Michael listed the TV, the 24-hour news networks. If you change your position on an item, you all of a sudden you're either a turncoat or a hero, depending on what network you're on. So I don't see much compromise coming up. President Biden got a lot done in his first 2 years with that Congress. I don't know how much is going to come out of this next Congress, because I think that there's a certain group of legislators that are going to investigate and not legislate.
Well, there's a lot more we could get into from the State of the Union, but a few days ago, we also had the State of the State from Governor Lee. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to the State of the
Our investments in public education and workforce development and safe schools, and our commitment to freedom and to families have all earned national recognition.
After pointing out Tennessee's successes, Governor Lee talked about proposals to help businesses and the workforce.
I'm also introducing the Tennessee Works Act to deliver more than $150 million in annual tax relief to small businesses and expand Tennessee's competitive edge for years to come.
He also focused on transportation, saying he wanted to provide more than $3 billion for roads and highways through the Transportation Modernization Act.
A plan to engage public-private partnerships, to build additional choice lanes on urban highways, and to provide a delivery model that builds rural and urban projects faster.
Governor Lee also calling for more money for education, school choice, school safety, third-grade reading initiatives, and teacher pay raises.
This year, I'm proposing an additional investment of $350 million into the TISA formula, and that includes $125 million for teacher pay raises.
And he wants to provide the Department of Children's Services with a bigger budget to deal with its current crisis.
And we are also proposing more than $190 million in additional resources to support the mission of DCS and provide for the safety and well-being of Tennessee children.
He continued by proposing $100 million for crisis pregnancy providers to improve access to health care and information for expectant mothers. And he finished by saying Tennessee must be a leader in clean, reliable nuclear energy.
We cannot pass up this opportunity.
All right, we hear from the governor on probably 10 different topics, so I'm going to let you just choose, pundit's choice, so to speak. Craig, if you want to get us started off with one of those topics that you want to hit on.
Well, it's certainly, the money didn't come too soon to correct the horrendous problems that are at DCS. I don't know that $190 million can solve those problems, but we don't need to have foster children sleeping in offices in Nashville or having to stay for excessive periods of times in emergency rooms around the state. So I think that was definitely a priority, and I'm glad that they're trying to do something about that quickly and effectively. If I pass by a booth and I have to put, 50 cents in a basket to use that road, that's a toll road. It's not a choice road. So I don't know if he's ever going to get anybody to call that anything other than a toll road. But it's a new plan. It's going to be a new way to try to finance what are very expensive, time-consuming projects in the state, and I hope it's a successful model. So, there's lots of things to talk about there, but those are my two things that come to mind.
Shelley, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, first on my list would be DCS. I work with the juvenile justice system. I'm on the Knox County Foster Care Review Board. It is not just in Nashville that foster care kids are sleeping on office floors. That's happening here in Knoxville as well. I don't think $190 million goes near far enough for what our kids in foster care are suffering. DCS caseworkers, I see it on a daily basis, are exiting en masse the last few years. I mean, he put $15.9 million to increase caseworker salaries. I just don't think it goes far enough. I would like to have seen that number much, much higher. He's dedicated money to expanding beds for complex and special needs kids. Those are kids that there's not housing for. They cannot sleep at the office, and they've ended up sleeping in hospitals just because there's nowhere else for them to go. We desperately need foster families, desperately need more caseworkers, so I'd like to see more money there. Transportation, again, I think that's an issue that we should all be coming together on. I was happy to see the transportation numbers, not just for the state projects, but that he also allocated, I think it was $300 million to the localities to do things that improve potholes on the road, which we all see. We all know someone who's had a flat tire from potholes, and to do some of those local projects, not just on the state level. The choice lanes, Tennessee is one of the few states we don't have the Peach Pass or the Sun Pass when we drive through Atlanta or drive through Florida. I think Tennessee is behind the times on doing that. And I do think that that's the way. I'm not happy about going through a toll road, but if it's truly the lanes that would allow you to have one of those passes and then pay based on what time of day it is, and you still have the other lanes if you don't want to pay, I'm all for that. And some public-private partnerships to get those roads built to help congestion, help traffic, because we're all seeing it here in Knoxville, and especially if you travel to Nashville, they're just growing at such a tremendous growth rate that they're going to need something on the transportation side.
Shelley, I don't mean to cut you off. I want to give Michael a minute because that's about all the time we have left. So, Michael, your response to any of those topics?
Well, I'm pleased to take the anchor leg on these topics. I know we don't have a lot of time. I'd like to say I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for Governor Lee. He is the prototypical state executive, and I think he's doing a fine job for the state of Tennessee. As it relates to DCS, if $190 million is not enough, and I just think that we should invest more money in that, not less.
And I guess we will soon find out if it is enough money, because we'll be hearing about it again if it isn't. We definitely want to thank you, Michael, for being with us, Shelley for being with us, Craig again for being with us. You've been watching Tennessee This Week. We thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting.